In Australia, coal seam gas is relatively new and was first produced in Queensland in 1996. Various people are describing coal seam gas as a non-renewable resource as well as being referred to as pure and non-toxic. This has led to controversy worldwide. There is a large amount of uncertainty surrounding the topic of coal seam gas and the potential impacts on the sustainable future, environmentally, financially, socially, and economically.
I would now like to introduce Mr. Paul Reynolds, who is a Specialist Support Environmental Health Officer from Camden Council and has been involved in the assessment of the Camden Gas Project. Is there any proof that coal seam gas benefits the environment?
Well, now probably the main claim that the coal seam gas industry make when trying to substantiate their environmental credentials relates to greenhouse gas emissions. Commonly, they'll use the figure that coal seam gas is 70% cleaner than coal-fired power when you look at greenhouse gas emissions. Now, there's a couple of problems with just using that blanket 70%, and the three key things are that the calculations are based on what emissions are made from the most efficient gas-fired power stations. When you compare those with the emissions made from the worst performing coal-fired power stations, so you get the best enormous quantities of greenhouse gas, and that obviously makes coal seam gas look fairly good. But the third part of it is that when the coal seam gas industry are putting their figures together, they include a very small allowance for fugitive emissions. So fugitive emissions are the release, either intentional or accidental, of methane from their production work. So that can be from the well itself, the distribution pipelines, the processing plant, any of those parts of their infrastructure will release fugitive emissions, and they only the figure that's used in their calculation of that fugitive emissions rate is about 0.1%. Now, some work from the United States that was done for one of the US federal government departments shows that in US gas fields, the rate of emissions, of fugitive emissions, is somewhere between 2% and 30% of the gas that's produced per well. So, where in Australia the industry is using 0.1% of the fact that they use the best gas-fired power stations compared against the worst coal-fired power stations with a fugitive emissions rate that is probably underreported in terms of real-world emissions rates, and you get a figure that they use of 70%. Now, whether or not it is, it's the real percentage in terms of comparing greenhouse gas emissions for coal seam gas and coal is close to that 70 or much worse than that. We don't really know.
And finally, what is your personal opinion of coal seam gas?
I haven't made up my mind yet because there are a number of things that we don't know about coal seam gas, and then what the impact of those things is likely to be. So the main things are in fracking, and then how those chemicals behave when you put them in mixtures inside a coal seam, and what does that do to any naturally occurring contaminants within the coal, so numerous heavy metals, all sorts of organic carbon compounds that have been shown to have deleterious effects on humans and the environment. So we don't really know the true impact of those impacts are from dewatering and from fracking and from fugitive emissions. I can't say I know either way.
Numerous farming communities have said that the development of coal seam gas cannot coexist with agricultural properties as well as the production of food. No-go zones have been called upon by the farmers to be established because of such beliefs. However, the government wants a balanced coexistence between resource development, agricultural production, as well as environmental protection. To achieve this, the government has developed strategic regional land use plans. Farmers are concerned with the vast expansion of coal seam gas, and in particular the extraction of gas which is known as fracking. This is because the majority of water which is used to grow and produce quality food for exportation to other countries are accessed through groundwater. Australia is a major part of exporting food, and if agricultural land is within the perimeter of coal seam gas, this will not continue as there will be risk of contamination. However, coal seam gas could significantly increase Australia's energy supply and security. There are various benefits both environmentally and economically which are voiced by the government. These include thousands of jobs which will be created and require varying skills, thus will need to be filled, which is increasing employment opportunities, providing royalty returns of over $850 million per annum, which could fund for schools, hospitals and other vital services. Coal seam gas generates approximately half the amount of carbon dioxide compared to brown coal, and if appropriate procedures are followed by the operator, no chemicals produced by fracking should find their way into the groundwater. Also, according to AGL, gas wells which are drilled and constructed are encased fully as well as pressure cemented to ensure all aquifers are sealed completely, thus not leaking groundwater in any way. Due to various arguments surrounding coal seam gas, it is evident that it is detrimental to vast communities, in particular the farming communities. Currently, there is a real absence of scientific knowledge and/or evidence on the impacts, and this is stated in the Parliamentary Inquiry 2012. Quote, "We need more data on specific water systems and the interconnectivity of aquifers and the potential impacts of multiple coal seam gas projects." Unquote. Also, impacts from current coal seam gas projects, including the Camden Gas Project, are not a reliable indicator of future environmental impacts because the timeframes for impacts to become apparent may be many decades. From a risk management perspective, it is the low-frequency, high-consequent events which need careful attention. Until further testing is conducted and all myths are proven untrue, there cannot be such claims from any gas companies, including AGL, that drilling wells cannot and do not contaminate groundwater. Therefore, in my opinion, coal seam gas is not the sustainable future.